take the opportunity to come to Sunday school on a particular Sunday at 10 o'clock, that you come to our Wednesday night. We have dinner at 6, followed by Bible study at 6:30. And I'm getting fatter by the week because the food's been so good. And Myrtle brought 3 desserts this past week, and they were all homemade and wonderful. So thank you for that, Myrtle. Thank you so much. We are going to be in John chapter 11 today, and we're going to build off of what Sela just read. We're going to talk about Lazarus and his miraculously being raised from the dead. But before we get there, I want to tell you a little joke because it goes along with what our sermon was last week. There was a monk that decided that he was going to go to this new monastery and take a vow of silence because this monastery was known for that. And so these guys just completely gave themselves to Christ. He goes in and they said, you do know we've taken a vow of silence. You only get to speak 2 words every 10 years. So after 10 years, you can come and you can say 2 words, and then it'll be another 10 years before you do that. So after 10 years elapsed, he comes and he says, they said, what are your 2 words? And he said, bad food. Walks out, goes back to his study, goes back to praying. 10 years more passed. It's been 20 now, but the second 10 years, and he comes back in and he says, you got 2 words. What are they for this decade? And he said, hard bed. And so another 10 years passes. He's doing his Bible study and prayer. And after 30 years, after this third 10, the guy says, it's been 10 more years. What's your 2 words? And he said, cold shower. And they said, so he goes back out. 10 more years pass. And after 40 years, he comes in. And the guy says, what are your 2 words? He said, I quit. The head guy of the monastery, the head guy says, doesn't surprise me a bit. You've done nothing but complain since you've been here. Right? Similar to the way that our lives are sometimes. We can become complainers, grumblers, and fault finders. That's what we talked about last week. We got to start focusing on the praises and our reasons to be thankful. Have you all ever had something happen? You know, today, the title of the sermon is Hope in the Darkness. Have you ever had something happen in your life that required you to completely lean on God? And did you have hope in that moment because of that? Now, Jill and I, when our kids were younger, we tended to be taxi service because we had 4 kids. And so Jill would take 1 and go over here to this practice, and I might take 2 and drop 1 off and go to another practice. And we were constantly doing this. And so one night I took Caleb to football practice, and Jill took EJ and Noah to practices for something else. And we were across town. And that's not right. She took EJ, I took Caleb, and Noah was at home. And he was with a friend of his named Alex, and they were middle school age. And so Caleb's practicing, I'm watching, EJ's practicing, Jill's watching, we're at separate fields. And so it starts looking a little dark off in the distance, like a storm was brewing kind of thing. And I was like, I hope we get done here, before this rain comes or whatever. And Noah was he called me and he said, Dad, can I cook some hamburgers on the grill for us tonight? And I said, I had taught him how to use the grill and all of that. And I said, he's about 13 years old. This would be a step of faith for me to really let him use the grill when I'm not there. And I said, okay. I said, you know what you're supposed to do? And he explained it to me over the phone. And I said, sounds right to me. And the hamburgers were already patted out in the refrigerator. And he started the grill, he and Alex, and he was going to cook some hamburgers. So the storm keeps coming, and I'm looking off in the distance, and we're still not done with practice. Jill's still not done with hers. And the coach goes, it's looking pretty bad. We're going to go ahead and quit. You guys can go on home. And so we packed in the car, and the wind was blowing, the rain was starting, and it was really very quickly getting bad. And Jill calls me, and she goes, are you looking at this? Because it looks really bad. And I'm like, yeah. I said, why don't you just go on over to my mom and dad's house just because you're close there, and I'll go run home because Noah and Alex are cooking hamburgers on the grill, and we'll take care of that. She goes, okay. So Caleb and I were driving to our house. We're about 25 minutes from our house, a drive. And I go, and the road that we're going down is a country road, and a tree goes, she just falls on the road in front of us. It's only about yay big around. So we get out, we push it out of the way, move it out of the road, doesn't hit our car, we don't hit it, and we keep going, Eloise. And Noah calls me on the phone. This is right after that tree fell. And he goes, Dad? He goes, the chimney just blew off the house. said, what? And he goes, it's storming really bad here. The winds are blowing really hard. Dad, what am I supposed to do? And I said, well, you should be in an inner room if it's blowing that hard, right? Are you in a, because I mean, we go over this with our kids. We train them, they train them in school. He goes, we're in a closet right in the middle. He said, that's where I'm calling you from. We're in this closet. What am I supposed to do? And I said, you guys just stay there. I'm coming as fast as I can to get there. And I said, and he's like, okay. He goes, Dad, there's water just draining down into the house, coming flooding into the house where the chimney was. And I'm like, we'll address that when I get there. And so I'm getting ready to hang up the phone, and I'm just worried to death. And I hear Noah on the other end, and he goes, Dad, Dad, Dad. And I went, what? And he goes, what do you want me to do about the hamburger? Because they were still on the grill out. And I don't know what they did that. I said, just leave. It's okay. Just leave. It's not a big deal. I get there, and it's coming a storm like nobody's business. I mean, lightning and thunder and rain, and I mean, it's just pouring into my living room and into my bedroom where there's a big giant hole in the roof of my house. And the chimney is laying in the backyard in about 1,000 pieces where the storm had blown it. And so my neighbor, I'm outside kind of looking. I don't have a tarp, and my neighbor, who was in his late 70s, opens his garage door, and he goes, you got a tarp? And I said, no. He goes, I saw it fall. And I was like, and he comes running and hands me a tarp, runs right back in his house, shuts the garage door. I said, I don't blame him whatsoever. I mean, it was awful. My friend Bill, I had called him when I was on my way home, and I said, the chimney has blown off my house. Would you and your family pray for us while this is going on? And he's like, absolutely. Well, within 20 minutes of me getting home, Bill's in my driveway in his big dually truck, and he's got tools and everything, and he puts a big 25-foot ladder up on the back of my house, and we're both climbing on my roof. We're having to nail down because it's so, the pitch on the roof is such, we're nailing 2x4s across just to climb up on to get to where it goes. And he's up there with me, and I mean, lightning's going zzz, and the thunder's going boom, and just pouring. I mean, we're soaked, and we're putting that tarp over the hole and nailing it down. And he's up there, and I said, Lord, thank you that I have friends like this right here that are willing to come out in the middle of this rainstorm. For those that are praying with all their might on their knees, for those that drove across town to come and help me, and for watching over my kids, my son and his best friend. And in the middle of that moment when we were driving home, Caleb was looking at me like, and he said later on, Dad, you didn't get all angry and crazy and worried and upset. And I said, it was in God's hands. There wasn't anything I could do. I had a 20-minute drive or more to get home. I just prayed my guts out that the Lord would watch over and take care of us. And I said, and he did. Well, in this particular story, we sit here and we look at it because this one is so much worse. It says in verse 1 of chapter 11, John 11, now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, Jesus, saying, Lord, behold, the one you love is sick. This is one of his really good friends. This is Lazarus, and he spent a lot of time at Mary and Martha's house. When Jesus heard that, he said, the sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Does that fit in anybody's head? Does that make sense to anybody? They sent word to Jesus, and they said, Jesus, we need you here. Our brother Lazarus is sick. Pretty dark moment, right, Eloise? Pretty dark moment. As they're sitting there, and they're like, he's not looking good. We better send for Jesus. We've seen him heal people before. Let's get Jesus to come here. And they don't send for the doctor, they send for Jesus. And I'm not against doctors or medicines, that's not the point. They're doing at their time what they thought was best, which is sending for the Son of God. But he stays 2 more days with his disciples, and it says in verse 7, then after this he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you there. Are you going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. He's making the point, if you're with me, you shouldn't be worried. I've been sent here. I'm going to accomplish what I was sent to do. Just stay with me. We'll be fine. It says, but if the one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. These things he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then his disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get well. Okay, now this this is like talking to your kids right here. When you're having a conversation with them, Jesus is trying to be nice about it. He's trying to say, he's asleep, we're going to go wake him up. And the disciples, remember, once Jesus said to them, beware the yeast of the Pharisees. And the disciples, Chris and Jimmy, looked at one another and they said, Jesus is mad because we didn't bring any sandwiches. And Jesus went, no, that is not what I'm upset about, right? There are no disciples, Jimmy and Chris. I was just using that as an example, right? Is that they couldn't figure it out. And in this moment, Jesus is talking metaphorically, and they're like, if he's asleep, then he'll get better. And why did they say those words? Because they don't want to go. They don't want to go somewhere where there's a chance that they're going to be stoned to death with Jesus. So they're making up, here's a reason. Here's a rationale for why we shouldn't do this. And I'm sure Sundar Singh did the same thing. Rationalizing why he shouldn't have to do it. It says, verse 13, however, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to them. Then Thomas, who is called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Now this is the kid on every team you've ever played on. Baseball, basketball, football. There's always a kid that's standing off to the side and the coach goes, we're playing a team that's undefeated for the last 4 years. They haven't been scored on. And we're going to go out there and we're going to do our very best and we're going to win this game. And there's always one kid that goes, I'm with you, coach. Let's go get killed. Right? There's always somebody who seems like, it seems like it's a good thing what he's saying, but it's really defeated. He's defeated at this moment. And that's Thomas. He's doubting Thomas. Verse 17, so when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. For us, when we read that, we just sit there and go, 4 days is a long time. To a Jewish person, 4 days meant, in their belief system, when you died, your spirit hovered over your body for 3 days. There was somewhat of a potential that it might be reunited with the body in some way, shape, or form, such as Elijah in the Old Testament or something like that, or Elisha even. And so for it to be 4 days, a Jewish person would say, it's too late. The 3 days are up. The spirit is now gone. It's not there anymore. And for them, they would say, this is an impossible situation. Lazarus is dead and gone. Jesus says in verse 18, now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. So she runs out to meet him. Then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And we don't know how to take that because it's just black and white. We don't know whether she's saying it. I'm thinking he's such a good friend. She's saying, if you'd been here, he wouldn't have died. You're such a good, you're so powerful. She's not chastising him for taking his time and waiting 2 days at that point. And verse 22, but even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. And when she had said these things, she went away and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher has come and is calling for you. Jesus comes to this moment, and he waited 2 days. And in fact, Lazarus is dead, been in there for 4 days now, and he is going to heal him. He's going to resurrect him from the dead, and it's going to be something so beyond belief that all the people that are standing there will have the opportunity to see something that they've never seen before. They're all standing there, and Jesus, it says that he weeps. He's sad. It's a funeral. He's human at this point in the sense of fully God, fully human, and he's standing there because it's a funeral, and the family is sad, and he's crying himself, and he says, roll the stone away. And the people there, because they're good Jews at this point, they say, no, don't roll that stone away. By now he stinketh, if you're reading King James, right? King James Version. He stinks by now. Don't do that. And Jesus said, roll it away. And they roll it away, and he speaks these words, Lazarus, come forth. Now, for some people, This is pretty amazing to me because I never, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, Eloise, so when I would read that, I just go, yeah, he said, Lazarus come forth, and out came Lazarus. But when you read commentaries and great theologians, they went, you know why he called him by name? And I'm like, no, I don't know why he called him by name, Larry. Why would he call him what does that make any difference? He said, because if Jesus had just said, come forth, then everybody that was in the grave would come forth. Because he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's the Son of God and has that kind of power. He specifically said, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus comes out like a mummy. I mean, his feet and hands tied, and he's trying, and Jesus says, cut him loose and set him free. And when he walked out like a mummy, because that's what they do. They wrap you in those clothes. You know this. You've read the story of Jesus' burial, right? And they wrap you with spices and all of that kind of stuff. It was their version of embalming. And so here he is, and he comes walking out, and I'm sure there was one or two that just fainted away. You know what I mean, right? And then he walks out, and their jaws, I'm sure every jaw there was this far down, and they're going, are you seeing this? Are you watching what just happened? We buried him. I put him in there and rolled that stone in front of him. That man was, the doctor over to the side is going, well, I pronounced him dead. He had no heartbeat. That man was dead. 4 days. And when he comes out, they are standing there, and for us, all of us that are sitting here, I believe that every single person sitting here, when he walked out, we would have all fallen on our faces in front of Jesus and said, you're the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Oh my goodness, that's the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life that just happened there. You are God's Son. You know what happens in this story? Half the people do that, and what the other half do? They go to the Pharisees and they go, you got to know what's going on over there. There's some crazy, demonic stuff that's going on over there. People are coming out of the grave after 4 days, and it's that Jesus guy that's doing that, and it says they began plotting to kill Jesus in that moment. If you're Mary and Martha, and in your life, every single day, there will be times when we feel like Mary and Martha in this moment. Something overwhelming and impossible is up against us. You know what I'm saying? Ruth in the Old Testament, Ruth's husband died, Ruth's father-in-law died, her brother-in-law died. There was a famine in the land, and they moved out of her country. She's Moabite. They moved back to Bethlehem, and they have nothing. They're as dirt poor as you can possibly be, and she's sitting there in that dark moment, and did she have hope? I just said she's Moabite. And yet, Naomi had shared, this is who God is. And over the course of the next few days, she goes out. Notice, she goes out to do something very humiliating and gleans in the field. That's what the poorest of the poor do. Everybody in town knows you're the poorest of the poor when you do that. And she's out there gathering up garbage, the stuff that the guys leave behind that's not good enough for their stores or for their own houses. And she's picking that up because it's all they have to eat. And in those moments, she meets Boaz, who ends up being her husband, and she has a child that ends up being in the line of Jesus genealogically. There was hope in that moment. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are standing outside, and Nebuchadnezzar's going, are you going to bow down to this 90-foot statue of gold that I made of myself? And they said, no, because God won't let us do that. They had hope in that moment. They told Nebuchadnezzar, they said, you can kill us if you want, but we believe that our God will rescue us. And when he throws them in the fiery furnace, what happens to them? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is in Babylon. What happens? Nebuchadnezzar starts looking into the fiery furnace, and he goes, Larry, how many guys did we throw in there? And they said, 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He goes, well, there's 4 walking around in there, and one of them looks like the Son of God. In those moments when Daniel's getting thrown into the lion's den or whatever it is, we have those moments in our lives. And do we have hope? Because that hope only comes from one place. None of us sit there and go, I'm tough enough and I'm smart enough and I can, yeah. No. The only thing that brings hope into an impossible situation is the power of God through his Son, Jesus. Now there are there's a story that I want to share with you. I wrote down a couple of notes about it because I want to make sure that I cover it right. During World War II, I wrote down here, it says, Hitler unleashed a military onslaught. He defeated the French and Belgians within a month and had the British hemmed in along the edge of the sea and was just about to win the World War II. in 1940. And I want you to hear that because this is the response. And this is what's most important, because whatever it is that comes at you, whether it's illness or marriage issues or issues with your kids or financial issues, whatever it is, what's our response in that moment? And if it's a turn to God, then it's the right thing. So King George VI, when this was happening, Germans are about to annihilate all of the British men that are there. There are hundreds of thousands of Brits that are all along these beaches, 340,000 of them there. And the Germans are just going to bomb them, and they're sending their tanks, they're going to destroy them, and they're sending men to just wipe them out. They're on the run. The British are on the run. King George VI calls for a national day of prayer on Sunday, May 26th. That's the day before my birthday. I wasn't born then, but you know. And so he says, this is a quote, "Let us with one heart and soul, humbly but confidently, commit our cause to God and ask his aid, that we may valiantly defend the right as it is given to us to see it." And when they did this National Day of Prayer, 5 miracles occurred. Okay, here are the 5 miracles, one right after the other. On May, it says, for some reason on that day, Hitler's tanks were 10 miles from Dunkirk, and you may have watched this movie. Hitler halted the attack and recalled all of his generals who were leading the attack back to Germany. He wanted to have a powwow. He wanted to have a meeting with them, and he did not. He just stopped everything on that particular day. The second miracle, inclement weather kept the German bombers from bombing all over the men that were along the beaches there, the 340,000 men. So bad weather came in. Then, that's the second one. So they had cloud cover and the bombers couldn't do it. The next one, the wind began to blow all the smoke from the previous Nazi bombing raids of all the towns around there, and it blew all of that smoke down along the coast, and it allowed for cover for the British men to be loaded onto ships to get out of there. So that's the third miracle. The fourth one, the English military then called for volunteers all throughout England to bring their boats and help haul men, ferry them across the 47 miles of just really rough seas that are there in the English Channel. So 850 boats, little ships, boats any size, came out and started ferrying Brits back from the coast back to England. They said that normally the English Channel is rough for any size boat. It's very difficult to navigate, and that on this day it was like water ski glass. It was just smooth as it could be. And then, over the course of the next few days, they evacuated all 340,000 men from there. And then here's the fifth miracle, because Churchill, who's not a Christian man normally, not a religious man normally, he says in the House of Commons on June the 4th, he called it a miracle, and on June the 9th they had a national day of Thanksgiving because all of those men were rescued and not annihilated. In those moments when tanks are moving at you as fast as they can move, and you can hear the bombers coming overhead, and you can see the thousands upon thousands of men coming in formation at you, and you're backed up to the sea, how much hope do you have? And in those moments, instead of going, we tend to, my generation and younger, my kids who are 24, 20, and 22, and 20, we tend to go, okay, it's time to Rambo, it's time to Terminator, we're going to get all of our gear on, and the few of us are going to go out here and defeat millions. And in that moment, the King of England said, no, we're going to turn to God and let him handle it. And in the midst of that darkness, God brought hope. Let's pray. Dear Lord, I'm so thankful today for your love. I'm thankful that you want a relationship with us, that you care about us, because, if you get high enough up in an airplane, you look like a bunch of ants on the ground. And Lord, you long for a relationship with each of us, no matter if we have money or we're poor, whether we're men or women. You love us. You created us in your image. And Lord, today, you are crying out to us and you're saying, hey, you've tried to do it on your own for so long. Want to try it my way? And today, Lord, I pray that we can carry that message out into the world, and we can bring hope in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of all that's going on that seems impossible, just like standing at Lazarus' tomb, that you still had the power to bring beauty in the midst of that situation, to bring a miracle in the midst of what was totally just a sad, sad situation. Lord, we ask that you would use us to bring that hope into the world, that you use this church, and that we could be your faithful hands and feet out there, Lord. And we pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen. We are going to sing a concluding song. There's 2 verses of